Returning to school can cause all sorts of emotions for kids. Some of them are excited, some may have some anxiety, and maybe even dread.
I think the parents are a little more excited about it than the kids. Joshua Essery, the licensed child psychologist, is here with us for tips for parents to help their children cope with the challenges of going back to school. Joshua, thank you for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Let's start by talking about what makes going back to school stressful for kids.
Sure. It's such a big transition. You know, there's so many questions like what kind of teacher may I get? Who will I sit with at lunch? Will the new kids like me? If I'm going to a new school, what will that mean? And so there's so much newness, and any kind of transition can bring about such complex emotions for anybody, but especially kids.
I would imagine that maybe some of the biggest transitions are the new schools, or maybe going from elementary to middle school,
Sure.
middle to high school.
Sure.
What do you typically see?
So that's true, but it just depends on the specific child, because any transition can be hard, and sometimes just getting out of a routine, getting into summer, enjoying the summer months and all the activities, and then having to go back can just be hard, even if you're going back to the same school.
And as far as going back to school, is there a typical age bracket where you've seen that it's more stressful, say, for high school or a little bit for younger kids?
I would say that the stress is different depending upon the age, and so a lot of parents can talk about the first day of school with kindergarten or whatever and the difficulties around separation, but later in school, even in high school, it can be hard because the social pressures can be so difficult, and so I think that each age brings about a different type of stress.
For parents going about their weekend, spending time with their kids, what are some of the signs they can look out for in case there is something that needs to be talked about?
Right. I think any specific change in behavior that's noticed, and so if your child is usually interactive and they're more withdrawn, if you find that they seem kind of preoccupied with things that they're not talking about, or they're kind of doing things that just don't really make sense based on how you know them, that would be a good time to check in.
So, based on the back to school, the normal visceral experience, how can a parent really tell the difference between, okay, these are normal back to school jitters,
Sure.
or maybe their child actually has a problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with things like, does this just happen when it's time to go to school, and then, you know, the child does well once they get to school and get in their routine? Or when the child comes home, are they still upset? And then do you see this same kind of problem over days and weeks? And so the longer it happens and the more often that it tends to go on, that's a good sign that this is something a little bit more than just jitters.
And what do you suggest to families to do in case
Sure.
that is the case?
I think it's always important for parents to kind of ask, is this just me as a parent, or do other adults see this? And so the first thing I would suggest is that the parent check in with the child's teacher and see, does the teacher see some of the same behaviors, and does the teacher or teachers have the same concerns? If that works, then great. If not, always checking in with the school counselor could be a good thing as well.
Okay. And, you know, you had mentioned the social pressures, you know, when you go back, and what came to mind was also monitoring what happens online as well. Do you have
Sure.
any tips for families, you know, when you're going back and your kids are maybe connecting with their friends more on the apps or online? What do you suggest to them to keep that as safe as possible?
So obviously having an appropriate amount of supervision while allowing your child space to be, you know, autonomous is important. And it's a hard question to answer, in part because it depends on the child's age, right? And so the older the child is, the more freedom they should have, but in reality, even kids in high school need some degree of parent supervision.
All right, and we're going to put up a full screen of all of your contact information and walk us through how people can get a hold of you guys.
Sure. So Clarity Child Guidance Center, we have a website, which should be up on the screen, as well as our phone number, which is 210-616-0300.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.